Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Music Club. This week we did Dead Root Stirring by Elder. I selected it this week. My selection process. I had listened to this album before. I thought it was good for the type of metal that it was. And that's pretty much it. Not a super, nothing super deep.
Start no dead roots within yourself.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah, it was a good pick. It's neat hearing. I mean, stoner metal is definitely polarizing. I assume it's kind of like Marmite. There we go. Spending a second looking for it, but it's the sort of thing you either love or you hate, right? I don't know that I've ever really heard anyone who's like super indifferent to stoner metal, or at least it's usually that a person will begin indifferent, and then when it doesn't change for like 5 minutes, they hate it.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a sort of weaponized apathy against the right kind of person. But like, to me, I can dig setting up a groove and just sort of sitting in that space. And there's actually quite a bit being done with what I assume was fairly limited means by these guys. Looking it up, it looks like at time of recording they were a trio, so there's clearly a lot of double tracking, a lot of parallel processing happening on the guitar.
Right.
I'm actually not certain whether it's double tracking or just parallel processing, but pretty regularly they'll start out, with it sounds like they're mostly doing LCR panning.
Mm-hmm.
At least based on what my ears were noticing, right? They'll frequently start out with a single kind of cleaner guitar line, panned hard left, and then bring in
Everything else.
the slightly different effects system, whatever the different effects processing on the same guitar line is, and then bring in the bass.
Yeah, Phantom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then bring everything in as well, yeah. Yeah, but it'll start out like just in your left ear, and then they'll bring in a different flavor of distortion, or like a wah or something.
Right.
Which is cool. Sometimes it was clearly double tracking because it would be playing in a much lower register.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'd be playing the same line like an octave lower. It does make me wonder how they would have done this stuff live. Like there are sections they could have done with a looper or with a pre-prepared loop. But
Right.
It would have been interesting. And I will say that, making the choice to utilize the fact that they were in the studio for making this recording, even if it would have made this stuff harder to replicate live, was definitely the right choice. It kept a lot of interest and gained a lot of texture.
Right. And it makes the sound
with pretty limited means.
like super full. You know what I'm saying? Which is definitely sort of a genre staple, I think. You really right, yeah, you want to create like a sonic space more than it is about actually like writing a tune. It's vibes, it's all about vibes. Which is sort of why I like this kind of music, because it's still considered progressive rock in some, like, at least according to the Wikipedia page. But like,
Progressive rock and stoner metal.
well, it is definitely stoner metal. Like, it's like a little doomy. But yeah, I mean, I like doom metal for the same reason, right? It's the unchangingness can actually be a benefit when you just kind of want to lock into a vibe. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're smoking. You don't want anything new and scary. You want You just kind of want to like get into that trance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, I listen to this stuff for the same reason that people listen to like dance music, right? Just to log into a vibe.
Yeah, and it's pretty well constructed for that purpose.
Mhm.
I listened to the remaster just because it was available.
Mhm.
It seems like that was like a 2017 remaster. I'm not really certain what would have changed. There's still definitely some stuff that I assume could not have really been fixed that much by a mastering engineer. Drums frequently sounded kind of like just muddy and flat, I guess would be a better term. And the bass was like barely audible for for most of the album, which there are sections where you could hear it, but most of the time it was definitely leading. You know, you could hear the drums, and when you get locked into the vibe, you don't like. When I wasn't really paying close attention, you know, I would lose kind of an awareness of sort of the flatness of the drums, but there was definitely a bit. But again, you know, this is what would be a niche act under any circumstances.
Mhm.
You know, this is one of their earliest records.
Yeah, I think it's their second one.
Expecting like perfect production on even just the kind of budget they were presumably working on.
Right.
Would have been a big ask. Getting perfect drums is really goddamn hard,
Yeah, absolutely.
particularly in 2009.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. The problem is there's not a ton of information online about this band. So I don't know like to what level their production would have been, like how much money or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the dog. They are on a couple different labels, but
Yeah, they bounce around with it. And they changed personnel a couple of times.
mm,
Yeah, they didn't get a second guitarist keyboard player until 2017. So I'm kind of interested to listen to some of their post 2017.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I do. This is the sort of thing where there's some really neat chops under the surface.
Hmm.
The vocal style is going to be a ticket. Again, it's going to be like either you can deal with rougher vocals or you can't.
Right.
I dig it. I think it works pretty well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the vocals are relatively sparse as it is, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the album. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe a little bit less, but like it is the vast majority of the album has no vocals. Which I think works for this kind of music. I think when you're doing this sort of slower and more tone-centric metal music, like, if you have a really solid vocalist who can really tune in, like, really naturally, then, like, go for it. But, like, in most of the doom metal or, like, black metal that I've listened to, most of the time the music is better served without vocals. Like, I don't know. Maybe the human
Yeah.
voice just...
Yeah. And I almost wonder if, you know, the inclusion of vocals was like a deliberate attempt to differentiate themselves.
Mhm.
They were kind of like, what's a thing we can add that's not present in most of the and it is kind of, it's definitely funny thinking about how much kind of framing and priming your listener with non-musical elements contributes to the overall experience you're going to have with stoner metal, particularly when you realize that, like, the primary audience for stoner metal is usually stone. I think, you know, we've entered a place where, like, that's less true now than it was, right? Like,
Right.
you know, I'm certainly not lighting up all the time, but I do still, I do still enjoy stoner metal. But, like, thinking about, like, something like Dope Smoker, right? Like, and the fact that they have these very lush, you know, pieces of album artwork and these kind of evocative titles, to sort of tell you what they had in their heads as they were writing this music. Because in the absence of lyrics and with more sparse instrumentation and frequently just a lower selection of riffs, right? The whole idea being that stoner metal is very meditative, it's very, like, finds a space and sits in it. There's some difficulty in creating a really distinct sense of space or sense of movement from space to space, right? Like, and I don't mean, like, there's a vibe, absolutely, but, like, you know, like, if I know I'm supposed to, like, frequently it's the sort of thing where it's like, where if they're imagining a desert, I could be imagining, like, I usually imagine a desert with stoner metal, but they could be imagining, you know, anything else. It's frequently deserts on the artwork as well, but they could be imagining, you know, like a time lapse of, you know, a forest growing or whatever the hell, right?
I mean, I like the artwork for this one because it's like sort of like a decaying dense forest. And that's kind of what, like, sort of like a spooky like fantasy forest. That's kind of what I like think about. It's like in a dark, like, fantasy forest. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think finally circling to the point I'm trying to make, like, with the lyrics, by including lyrics, they can kind of coach you into that space a little bit more. By deliberately, you know, invoking imagery alongside it. And I'll say that, you know, on the one hand, it's interesting realizing, like, that there's only so much you can do to create a more distinctive atmosphere without no longer being stoner metal, right? Like, if you're including all of this ornate sound design and bringing in, like, you know, unique found sound type stuff, you're getting more, you're becoming something else. And I get that, like, there would still be an audience for that, presumably, but it's outside of the kind of established subculture, I suppose.
Right. I mean, that kind of stuff definitely exists. I mean, like, if you want to talk about something that feels like a remnant of stoner metal, but it's just mostly, like, found fucking audio, Godspeed You Black Emperor, right, is, like, a great example of, like, it's dark, it's heavy, but it's not really, I mean, it's rock, I guess, but it's not really, like, metal. Yeah, it's not really like metal, but, like, still has similar, just, like, vibes. I mean, that is ambient more than it is. And I suppose you could go the other direction, right? The, like, overproduction route of, like, just putting tons of stuff in there, making it super cinematic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I derailed you.
No, not at all. And I think that does add to a sense of specificity, but that can also detract. That can detract as well, and that can, you know, it can potentially alienate your audience. I'd be interested in knowing, like, what the comparative, like, how many people like stoner metal versus how many, as a genre, right, with a kind of pretty well defined sound, versus how many people really dig Godspeed You Black Emperor. I know that, like, I'm a huge Godspeed You Black Emperor fan.
Right.
I imagine
Yeah.
that, you know, the very measured pace they strike in building most of their tracks it is probably able to alienate a decent number of people, right? Because they're not riff centric. I mean, they get riff centric usually as they build towards the end of the track, but like
Right.
it lacks the sort of like visceral appeal that you can still have with stoner metal, and that there's still some like nice riffs to sit on.
Right. There's not like a hook as much. Like
Yeah.
stoner metal, like I think a good example is like Electric Wizard. I don't know if you listen to that band. They'll take like these, or even like if we want to go back, this isn't, well, I'm sure stoners definitely listen to this, and this is metal, and this is sort of the progenitor of metal. You look at Black Sabbath, right? You take sort of like blues rock-y riffs, slow them down. They're still really catchy, but they're slow, and you can get into these cool like just like little jammy spaces with it. And I think that's sort of the hook that stoner metal has, right? Now, of course, then they repeat another 100 times, which some people may not like, but yeah, definitely something like Godspeed You Black Emperor does not have that.
Yeah, and it makes me think of I think it's Adam Neely quoting somebody else, which is saying repetition legitimizes, right?
Yeah.
In something like Godspeed You Black Emperor, there's an amount of repetition, but they're frequently more about kind of a transit through a space rather than
Right.
being totally seated in one, which prevents a lot of the like hook-centric kind of approach you can bring from. Although they still have some, they'll still have repeating motifs. And I did notice that was one. There was a repeating motif in this album that I noticed just coming up through a bunch of different songs, and it was neat. That they really constructed kind of a leitmotif where I don't know what it was supposed to be signifying, but it was neat seeing that as a through line.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I will say, the fact that they're continuing, I definitely want to check out more of their music, because in general, I have sort of found, like, what I could hear in this was that this was a stoner metal project that was ambitious enough to, like, it was written with enough ambition that, I could tell that it was the sort of thing that could evolve. Because, again, he's doing there's a lot of processing that's frequently skipped, right? Like, to keep some amount of sonic interest and to, like, massage the whole track into just sitting better. And there's, like, a kind of care and craftsmanship that is frequently, I think, pretty consciously avoided in stoner metal.
Right.
Like, a lot of it, it goes for the, like, degraded vinyl, like, blown-out speaker sound.
Right.
Whereas here, there's clearly an attempt to make it more artful, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true.
Some stoner metal is constructed with a pretty overt, just being like excessively laid back is like part of the character you play as a stoner, as certain stoner metal acts. I'm not going to say that there aren't some that, like, God, I've said the word stoner metal so many times I have to, like,
It's ceased to be a real word.
yeah. And the VOD will just have to add a counter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing that work, but it's a great idea.
But there are clearly some acts that, basically started writing shit by getting high, laying down some riffs, and then you know, eventually they sort of got it into a state where they record it, and that's basically all they aspire to do. Whereas there's a little more there I can feel a little more artfulness here, right? In that recurring motif, in the frequent parallel processing, the pretty good pairing of like just timbral choices, right, to create two very distinct guitar tones that you know both add stereo width and really flesh out the piece texturally. So I'm not surprised that, you know, they released something as recent as 2020. I'm not surprised they've had some staying power, and I'd be interested to see how they've evolved. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and it's just still, you know, the entire creative process is just basically like, all right, we're gonna get high and jam. There's nothing wrong with that, for the record.
No, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It just frequently, you know, I will forever be the evangelist for music that's all about feel, and stoner metal very much is that. But it's interesting seeing somebody trying to move in the direction of saying something a little more concrete, while still utilizing that sort of sonic palette.
Right.
So yeah, I'd just be interested to see how they've evolved, to see how they might have matured as an artist from this point onward. And I think, you know, it's as much probably getting access to just better resources as it is maturation, right? Because
yeah, absolutely.
Without extensive digital hardware, like there's only so much you can do as a 3-piece.
Yeah, unless you're some kind of editing god, you know, there really is limited. Yeah, and if you walk into a big studio, I mean, immediately, like, just everything's gonna sound better. Like, it's just better gear, you know. It's just, and you know, you have professional engineers, and you have, you know, like the fact that this album was remastered, even though it only came out a decade ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was remastered a decade after it came out. Like, that just goes to show they're like, oh, we have this much resources a decade later. We want to remaster an album that's not even that old. Because, yeah, I mean, it's not like they're like recapturing the old vinyl, like, whatever, like, or the old tape recordings or whatever. They're literally just like, yeah, we could do a better job on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably. Who knows? I want to do eventually, like, I want to at some point in time in my life record a full record onto tape.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's got to be something that suits the tape sound. But I don't know.
Wait, yeah. I can already hear all of this stuff. How dare you say that most of these acts aren't being artful? That's not, you know, that's not really what I meant. I just meant you frequently, like, at most they're like, you can tell it's like, all right, we've got this image and it's like, there's like a dude walking through the desert and the dude is going to like a holy place. But the holy place is fucked up, man. And that's like that's like the place they write from. That's the concept.
So fucked
and it
up.
works.
Yeah.
It's still cool. But it just feels like there's more going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think artful is a good way to put it, because it's not as though the work itself isn't art, but the intention of it being artistic, you know what I'm saying, does make a large difference in the outcome.
And it just feels like there's much closer attention and care placed into crafting again, both particularly the timbre, the kind of timbre selections of the guitar,
Right.
and just the track as a whole. And again, yeah, the fact that they went back and remastered it shows that there clearly was that kind of care. You know, if they were even able to say like this didn't really sound how we wanted, you know, how we wanted it to in 2009, so let's go back, get something a little closer.
Right. Right.
Because, again, you know, there's an ethos in a decent amount of the DIY kind of genres of music that are easier to write with more limited skill set. Where people are just like, yeah, man, it's totally cool that everything sounds washed out, and bloody, and you can't really tell what chords beat. Like, that's what we're going for, man. And it's like, because again, I'll as somebody who likes the genre, it's just disappointing that sometimes, you know, the audio engineer in my brain, or the amateur audio engineer in my brain hears stuff and it's like, Jesus Christ, I can't distinguish anything that's going on right now, and they just went with this. Right.
Yeah. 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 That's definitely, yeah, I agree with you. Like, too often intention, or not intention, but laziness disguises intention
Yep.
will overpower some things in the recording process. But also, like, I think a lot of, like, there's, like, sort of a mentality that going out and finding an engineer to, like, and, like, paying someone, like, money to, like, do all that stuff is sort of, like, corporate or not true to your own music. Like, you don't want to have someone else touching it, so you just do it all yourself, right? And a lot of, like, DIY will end up like that. And then someone's own inexperience will lead to just, like, whatever. But, I mean, at least in our own case, I know me, personally, it's only because lack of funds. I would definitely rather pay someone else to, engineer music that I personally have written. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think, yeah, the control freak in me always debates on that. It's the sort of thing, ultimately it's the sort of thing that I know if you handed me a check and said you can get an engineer with this and only get an engineer with this, I would do it. I'd be like, okay, I can definitely use this. But it's like, I definitely wouldn't want to just hand it off, right? I'd want to be in the room, as much so I could learn the skill set as anything else. And once you learn how to do it, at the very least, you know that if you don't have money for an engineer in the future, you can still make something releasable.
Right. Which is the exact reason why a lot of engineers won't let you be in the room. Because they want to preserve their, trade secrets. Which I think is stupid. Like, honestly, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that, like, if you have been doing it for a decade and you teach someone something for an hour, that they're going to become so good that they'll be able to replace you. And if they do, what does that say about your decade of work? But, like, with mastering specifically, it is a little bit different. Because, like, mixing, like, I don't know, I guess it's sort of an opinion.
I would pass. Fuck mastering.
Like, yeah, like,
comfortable handing off.
with mixing, like, I get how it could be, like, an opinion. Like, you're like, oh, I want this to be on the left side, and I want it to be louder than everything else, and so another mixing engineer, like, two mixing engineers could disagree on, like, like, especially if it's, like, artistic intent, but, like, mastering, yeah, like,
No, fuck mastering. That shit's a black art. I mean, I'd still like to be in the room just so I could learn something about it. But like, yeah, for me, control over the mix is kind of where my control subsides. You know,
Right.
I can get everything mostly set up the way I want it now. I trust somebody else to kind of finesse things.
And to be honest,
Mixed decisions can fundamentally change the identity of a piece.
oh, absolutely. And to be honest, like, I think in the era of electronic music, mixing your own stuff is fine. I think the days in which being your own mixing engineer would be impossible or not suggested is when you're going into a studio, you know, that's the only option, you know. You're getting stuff recorded like you're like some big live band, right? Like you're a musician who's practiced playing your instrument all your life. You don't know how to work that equipment, right? But modernly, the instrument is integrated into the software in which you are mixing it. So it's like learning those two skills together makes a lot more sense as opposed to, you know, recording a rock album in the 70s and you practice guitar, you know, you're a guitar player and that's all you do, or you're a keyboard player and that's what you do, right? There's no computers. It's just a big fucking soundboard, like, yeah.
Yeah, they're reel to reel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so ultimately, this was a cool entry point into their work. I'd be interested to
Mhm.
see where they've gone since then.
Yeah. You know, I feel like we say that a lot, and I want to start following through on us saying that. Like, have a thing where we, like, listen to an early album from a band, and then a couple weeks later, or even the next week, if we don't, you know, want a change of pace, listen to a later album, and then compare, you know, to the previous one.
Came to them.
Because, yeah, we haven't done any repeat artists at all yet, right? Like, we haven't repeated an artist. Which is something that's bound to happen eventually.
Yeah.
So... Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any more notes.
There's some cool note selection.
Mm-hmm.
I like, you know, whenever somebody chooses to land on the major 6 in a Dorian scale, and it's a nice time. In general, he's got some good, like yeah, just some good compositional sensibilities. I think what I like that I hear in this is, you know, it is written a little more. It's written with a little bit more of a compositional mindset, right? It's not just vibes.
Yeah.
And that, you know, they'll set up, when there are solos, they're still frequently, usually pre-written solos, at least based on the way they sound, right? And they've got like kind of a melodic arc to them, a general sense of directionality, a general sense of like kind of a core, rather like kind of an intentional core rather than a spontaneous improvisation. And again, like improv is brilliant and leads to really cool moments, but again, the fact that there are these pre-written solos and these melody lines, at least in my experience, that is also something that kind of differentiates them from the background of stoner metal, which is why I get why people sort of classify them as prog rock too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because those more overtly melodic elements are just sort of not generally part generally part of the genre that I've said too many times.
Yeah. The genre that shall not be named.
Boulder alloy.
Uh-huh.
Rock thriller, Ferris. Anyway.
I mean, that Ferris is just iron, though. I mean, it could be any kind of
Yeah.
metal.
It's true. It's true. There aren't that many adjectives for me. And not adjectives. There aren't that many synonyms.
Yeah, that's true. Aside from, I suppose, metals themselves. Well, I suppose most... what is... most synonyms... there's gotta be a word that it means to, like, of being a synonym. Like, synomic? I don't know.
Synonymous?
Synonymous. Duh. The specific types of metal, you know. You'll have a synonym for copper, or a synonym for iron, or a synonym for steel, but yeah, it's not just metal in general. I suppose is too general of a term. Yeah. All right, you want to do ratings?
Sure.
I'll let you go first.
Listenability. I'll give it like a 6.5, because when I'm in the mood for it, I'm in the mood for it, but I'm not in the mood for it all that often.
Mm.
It's perfect for the right moment, but like, I will also say that I'm frequently not in the right kind of headspace for this kind of music for the duration of an entire album.
Oh yeah.
Weird, like, it's the sort of thing where I'll be in the mood for that for like about like the duration for about 30 minutes, and this is 52 minutes, so like it's just enough time for me to potentially get tired. I did enjoy listening to this the whole way through, but that was largely because I gave myself permission to let my mind wander a little bit.
Yeah. And it's okay to take breaks in the music, you know.
But point being, yeah, I can't just like hit play and like be sure that I'm gonna get through the whole thing.
Right.
Because it is a little monotonous.
Yeah.
As somebody who, yeah. Which isn't to say I don't like monotonous music. Just
Well, that's why you're supposed to be stoned.
I'm gonna go for like fucking Lustmore, right?
Yeah.
Dark ambient shit.
Yeah, that's why you're supposed to be stoned, so you don't get bored.
I'm not consuming as intended, clearly. But overall, though, it's still well constructed, and I still enjoyed it. So yeah, it's better than average. And so I'd go with the 6.5. Musicianship. I'll give it like an 8, because I think in particular like the guitarist slash like frontman dude, the interplay between the guitar and the drums, which are the mostly audible elements, is pretty solid. They're solid performances. They're not super showy, but again, that would be pretty well outside of any of the genre expectations we would have here if they did get super showy.
Yeah.
And it would sort of, going for something that intentionally attention-grabbing would kind of contradict the intention of the piece, I think. So in general, they're pretty solid performances. And again, there were plenty of moments where I was surprised by interesting melodic choices, interesting rhythmic schemes. Kind of hard for me to give an opinion on the bassist since I just could not hear them like at all. I don't know if it was my headphones. Usually my headphones don't have trouble picking up bass though, so
I think it's just mixed to low and, you know, not necessarily wide, but it's just part of the, you know, it's meant to blend completely, I suppose.
Yeah, which who knows? You know, maybe that's also an accomplishment. But in general, yeah, I'll give it an 8. Because I think these guys are solid, and these guys are solid musicians. They're just writing in a mode that doesn't require huge flexing, but still accomplishing that artfully is still difficult, and they've managed to do that pretty well here. It's listenability, musicianship, weird factor, cohesion. Cohesion, it's real cohesive, almost too cohesive. So cohesive that it can detract from the listenability. So yeah, it definitely, from track to track to track, it feels like you're in the same space. You know, it's the sort of thing that if there wasn't clear evidence of double tracking just based on the number of personnel they have, I would believe that this was just recorded in a room, right? Like it's just like a really well recorded live thing, right? You can feel a sense of whatever space they recorded it in. It feels contiguous, right? It feels like kind of sitting in on a performance and zoning out. So really high cohesion. I'll give it like an 8.5 or a 9. And weird factor, 6. They're doing some things for the genre that are unexpected. They're again the inclusion of vocals, the inclusion of more discernible melody lines is neat and refreshing and helps to combat some of the fatigue. Like the fact I will say that like the fact that that 30 minutes would work for this is saying something, because frequently I can take like 5 to 10 minutes of repetition of the same of a riff, right, moving into maybe a different riff, but it's still just repeating a riff over and over. Like I can't take that for very long most of the time, and they're doing enough to keep generating interest here, that like the fact that it was able to hold my attention pretty solidly for that 30 minutes is a testament to their being willing to do something different and doing it rather well. So yeah, weird factor. I'll put it at a 6. Not redefining either of the genres they're pulling from, but alloying them in an interesting way.
All right. I have to agree with you on weird factor. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Listenability, I give it an 8 when I'm stoned. Because it's great. It's perfect for that. It really is. And you don't have to be deeply in it. But, like, I have this mode that I like to be in. And it's not all day, but it's like a rest mode where my brain just turns off. And this type of music is perfect for that. But like, yeah, if I was like, I don't know, getting shit done, this isn't music that you clean your house to, this isn't.
God.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Music that if I came into a mechanic shop and this is playing, I'd be a little worried about driving my car. Shop after that.
That makes me wonder, what is the music that you would most trust at a mechanic shop?
That's a good fucking question.
Think about that while I finish my tones.
IDM.
Interesting.
I'd be really
Interesting.
surprised, but I'd be like, this kind of person choosing to be mechanic has to be obsessive. Like, oh, that doesn't
Yeah.
give a shit at all. Fuck.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's also sort of this is the vibe I get from IDM is very talented and very smart at what they do, but that makes them lazy. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The sort of gifted kid mentality.
Fine. Classical.
Ooh. Yeah, it's probably an old man. If that's the case, it's probably an old man or a hardcore conservative. So either you're gonna get super ripped off, or
Okay.
they're
Yeah,
gonna
if
do a
it's
great
not
job.
that they only work on BMWs. Maybe I don't patronize that.
Yeah. It's gonna be a hardcore conservative, and that means either they're gonna do a really good job, or you're gonna get completely ripped off, or both. It's gonna be super high quality, but they're gonna charge you like twice as much as what they should, and they're not gonna tell you until it's too late and they've already worked on it and you owe them money.
Yeah, whereas I think it's so much about like the person that you imagine. I'm imagining just like kind of not that there really is like, but I'm just imagining like your kind of typical down to earth mechanic dude who just happens to be super into classical music. Okay.
Actually, yeah, I get the guy who's
I trust that brain to work on cars.
the guy who's gonna rip you off is listening to like yacht rock. Like when you
Oh god.
walk in, if there's Jimmy Buffett playing on the speakers, they're going to charge you an extra $1,000 after they've already worked on your car.
Yep, yep. And I think the clear distinction here is it's like I trust the mechanic who's like I can hear classical music playing on their headphones, or it's like playing in the shop. I do not trust the mechanic who's playing classical music in the lobby.
In the lobby. Yeah, because that's like a class indicator, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's like a... Oh, this is the fancy mechanic.
Yeah. If it's a performative thing,
Yeah.
but if it's just for their own enjoyment, it's, if I'm hearing like Debussy as they're working on them.
Debussy. That's how I always read it. When I see is Debussy.
Oh god.
I did. What was it? Weird Factor, I agreed with you? Yes, and then listenability,
8 when you're stoned.
or when I'm stoned. Which is the only important time. Cohesion, 9. It's just like a thing. Like it's like it's just like a brick. It's like a brick of music. It's just like it is a solid thing. It's yeah, like you said, even to its own detriment, it is cohesive. It is. I don't know. It's like unnuancedly cohesive, which a brick is. And then the last one is musicianship. The musicianship is good. 7.5, 7.8. I don't want to quite give it an 8, just because I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement. I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement, but I also feel like it's really good, and they really do what they're meaning to do really well, but I don't know. Yeah, so that's all 4. Overall, I'm gonna give it an 8. This is an enjoyable experience that I mean to replicate. Not like super often, but like definitely I will listen to this full album multiple times again this year.
Yeah. Whereas for me, yeah, it's gonna be more like a 7. And then, it's neat. I enjoyed it. Not something I'm gonna reach for a ton. Although, again, it is something I would reach for if I just as like a reference if I wanted to kind of move into that sort of a space myself, right? Just for some like ideas on how to vary up guitar tone. Like, there's neat stuff going on. So yeah, for me, like a 7. I can dig a lot of what's happening. It's just not typically the vibe that I want to score my life with.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel as though the score has chosen me versus the other way around in this scenario. I think if I was like freshly a born baby and you know, Jesus was like, "What type of music do you want to like?" I would not say stoner metal. You know. However, life has chosen me, you know. So
No, and for the record, I'm not. Yeah, like I do enjoy. I enjoy it. It's just I'm not right. I'm yet not typically in the right headspace for it as much anymore.
right.
Which is not a bad headspace. It's just not one that I have to be.
Right. No, I mean, I don't mean to look down upon myself or others when I say that. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Alright. Yeah. I'm hungry and I don't want to eat on camera, so. Or at least on Twitch. Although that's like a thing. I could be a mukbang person, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, just sort of mukbang.
Yeah. Get super
Probably want to insert sort of get some separation though, just segueing straight from music club to mukbang.
Maybe that's the combination. Maybe that's the like lightning combination that I've just been missing. Right? That's where it's really gonna take off. Is just a mukbang aspect.
Music critique through a mouthful of food.
You never know. You never know. I mean, I just feel like the audiophile type people who would want to listen to people talk about like some random album for an hour probably aren't the same type of people who like the sounds of eating. But like, I don't know that. Like, just because that's my personal experience, that's anecdotal evidence. That doesn't mean shit.
Yeah. Sure, it's probably going to trigger misophonia in like 50 to 75% of the people who really care about it. That 25% might dig it.
It's all about the niche audience, right? Those are the people who are willing to give you those Patreon bucks.
Riches and niches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you get yourself dead. This was a cool album. Thanks for recommending it.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, all of you that are watching out there, you have a nice day, okay? And make sure to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things. You better hit those fucking buttons. Thank you.